The story is told, though who can say if it be true, of a clan of medieval warriors awoken in modern-day Manhattan, of the animated series that told their story.
It is an age of darkness. Superstition and the sword rule. It is an age of fear. It is the age of gargoyles.
Welcome to Voices from the Eyrie, a Gargoyles podcast.
Welcome back, Gargoyles fans, to another episode of Voices from the Eyrie, a Gargoyles podcast. I am your co-host, Greg Weisman, and joining me is my partner in crime, the other co-host, Jennifer L. Anderson.
Hello, everyone.
How are you today, Jen?
I'm very dizzy, but I'm here, and that's good.
It's always good.
I'm dizzy. I like how to dizzy spell like, whoa. All my parts are just not working anymore.
And here I was going to guess you went Tasmanian devil on someone the other day.
I'm too tired to do that anymore. I used to do it all the time. I'm too tired now.
And we would like to reintroduce the show, the director of the episode we're going to talk about any minute now, and one of the other and the third producer on the show, Mr. Dennis Woodyard.
Hello, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming back.
So glad to have you.
How are you today?
Good, very good.
Great, glad to hear. We'll talk about that a little bit more. And we would also like to introduce back, as always, the creator of Gargoyles, Mr. Greg Weisman.
They try to get rid of me. They try, and I just keep showing up. Hi.
So how are you today, Greg?
I'm very well, thank you.
Great. So, Dennis, it's been a while since we've spoken to you. I believe the last time was Avalon Part 2, and now we're in the second half of the world tour. So, how have you been?
I've been good. Had some medical things that's cleared up and very, very fine right now. So, I'm good. I
love the clearing up of medical things.
Yeah.
I just keep collecting them.
But no, we're glad to see you. We're glad you're doing well. And for our video watchers, we're always glad to see his office behind him. A lot of cool stuff.
It's like I'm overdue on decluttering. That's all I can say.
You can't see it here, but I've got a huge geek collection surrounding me.
That just means more dusting.
Yeah, it does. I've got a process. I've got it down to a science. All right, so we're talking about the episode Mark of the Panther, a pretty significant episode. It's one that I've always liked, and it's grown on me more and more over the years. Before we dive into some of the contents with our heroes, one of the things that I always thought was interesting about this episode was, and Dennis, I would love to hear your perspective on this as well, the way it, about partway through the beginning, it just completely changes animation style for several minutes as Diane Maza tells the tale of the Panther Queen. I'm kind of thinking, imagine someone tuned in late and they're thinking, okay, Gargoyles is on. What is this? This isn't Gargoyles.
Well, that was intentional, especially on my part. It was intentional that we wanted it to. She's telling a story as if it was a children's story. So I talked with Greg Weisman and Greg Guler about designing that segment to look like a children's book, to sort of a simplified, more stylized look that took it away from just being a regular gargoyle animation thing. So you knew something was different, and I think it worked pretty well.
I think it was also extremely daring for the time. I mean, I don't think there were, it was a risk. What you said, people tuning in and going, wait a minute, where's my show? That was a risk, but it was those kinds of risks we like to take on the show. And I'm still really proud of how that turned out. I think it's sort of cool.
I thought, and it was that sort of thing of, hey, I gave him some African art references. You'd have to come to the show kind of late because, we did get through the intro of them getting through and then getting to the village and
going over a waterfall.
Hey, if you're in that late, screw it, go watch something else. We don't care anymore. No, it was that was part of the philosophy on that one, was that to give it a different feel, just for that segment, to have it more of a children's book, the African motif, that type of thing.
Jen, what do you think of that sequence?
I love it. I really am particularly fond of the Panther design itself. Like, I really think it's really cool looking. So, and you know what? Like, if you guys hadn't been like, hey, this is, what if someone tunes in? Because I was always there right at the top of the hour.
Me too.
I just thought it was really cool. It took you into story time.
Yeah, exactly.
I absolutely love it. I always thought it looked really cool, really interesting. She mocked the hippo. She mocked the crocodile. I mean, pretty ballsy. Hippos are assholes.
Very large assholes.
Yeah.
Very large. Very vicious.
So, to both of you,
Trying to give it the rhythm. Also, first off, I want to give so much credit to Nichelle Nichols.
Yes.
Did that in 2 takes. That's time it. It's not short. She does this monologue, recorded it in 2 takes, and just brings so much to it. But we also tried in the writing of it to create a kind of rhythm that felt like a children's book, felt like a fable, a piece of mythology, and so that it would really, again, have a different feel from the rest of the show, from a typical episode, from anything like that, that really created in the music that Carl did, in the look of the thing, in the words, both as written and as spoken. We really wanted to give it its own sort of unique moment. And again, I don't think a lot of people were doing that in the 90s on afternoon television. You
were a risk taker. And was the tale of the Panther Queen based on any folklore?
Not really. Anansi is a trickster figure. He's a hero figure, mostly. But tricksters are always characters on the edge. Sometimes they make bad decisions to suit their appetites. So it felt fairly authentic to us. Again, this is sort of the internet existed in a technical sense, but it didn't exist in the way it does now. The ability to just rapidly do all sorts of research and that kind of thing wasn't possible. And although we could research by, not kidding, going to a thing called a library, sitting down and checking out books and stuff like that, our schedules didn't give us that much time. So we went through a bunch of iterations on the Panther Queen. In fact, one of the big dumbass problems we had early on is we kept getting the type of cat in Africa wrong. I think we started with jaguars and then leopards, and then finally realized, no, it's panthers in Nigeria. So we should be doing panthers, not South American jaguars. And so that was, but we at least got that much right. And and I was familiar with certain Anansi legends, and this felt like of a piece with those legends on the selfish side of his personality. In other words, he does a lot of heroic things, but we also thought it was fair game, as with Puck, as with Raven, as with Coyote, or even Xanatos for that matter. With any trickster figure, they do a lot of positive stuff, but they also, they wouldn't be tricksters if they weren't on that razor's edge of sometimes it's not a positive thing. And so it felt to us, at least in those days, like fair game. And it felt like we were being respectful of the culture to the extent we were able in 1990, what was it? Probably 3 or 4 when we were, or 5, I guess, when we were making this thing. And I think it holds up, and there were things we did, at one point we had it being the creation of humanity, that the Panther Queen gives birth to the human race. And then we're like, no, that's taking too much liberty with the legends of the place. So let's pull back from that. She just has some children that she loves. She didn't create the entire human race. So we tried again to balance as much as possible what we could do, how we could depict it. And, like I said, I think it holds up pretty well. Would I do it different now? Yeah, we would do way more research. But given our constraints at the time, I'm pretty proud of how it all turned.
Well, I have to add that I think I told you, I did an Anansi story before. Back in the 70s, I was doing children's film strips, illustrating children's film strips, and one of them was called A King's Drum, and was Anansi as a counselor to a chief. So when I saw that, I said, it's like, hey, I must have been destined to do this show. I've already done this character. But it was, again, as Greg said, sometimes as a trickster, he's a different sort of form. In this way, in the King's Drum story, there was the story of the king of the village asked for a drum to be made so he can summon all the animals to meetings. And they were ordered to go help make it, but except for one lazy monkey who would just sit up in the trees and taunt the other animals, and as they were working hard. So in the end, though, Anansi, as the counselor, turned the other animals against the monkey, and had them decide that, well, who should carry the heavy drum from the middle of the jungle to the king's throne is a person who didn't do anything, and that would be the monkey. So that was that story, again, as Anansi as a good influence, as the counselor to the king. But I put a little video on my website about that. It's in connecting that. I felt really actually like a full circle thing, and it gave me a lot of pride in doing Mark of the Panther.
Oh, we're going to link to that. Speaking of, didn't you recently do a presentation of Mark of the Panther?
Yes, I did it at a library for a very small group, but it was for Black History Month, really. And I always thought that Disney, if they were really smart, they would just take that one little section and feature it on Black History Month, just by itself, it was a public library, so I had introduced to the library director for children program. He said, "Can you come in and do a show?" I said, "Well, this would be perfect. It's Black History Month. I'll do a little presentation and show the show," and it came out very successful.
Very cool.
Love it.
And you know what? You unlocked a memory for me there with the story of the monkey, the lazy monkey. Like, I don't think if you would have asked me about that, I would have ever remembered that ever being a story anywhere. But like you mentioning it, I'm like, yeah, I remember this, sir. I don't know where or when, but it was just like, whoa, memory unlocked.
We will definitely be linking to your YouTube page in our comments, in our show info, in our show notes. So we'll definitely be doing that.
I can send you the link to the video.
Oh, please.
Perfect. Thank you.
That'd
Awesome.
be great. All right. Before we dive into the episode itself as a whole, I mean, we'll talk more about the Anansi legend as well. Well, we need to discuss the guest cast for this one because this is packed. I mean, we should start with Nichelle Nichols, who we've already mentioned is incredible. And I've only ever had the pleasure of meeting Nichelle Nichols once, and that was at the gathering 2003 in New York City, which I chaired at the time. She came over for dinner. She did a Q&A at the dinner. And as I recall, I sat at your table, Greg. I didn't sit at Nichelle's. I could have, but I was intimidated, mostly because this woman is a legend. If I sit at her table, I have to be on my absolute best behavior with every little move I make.
You would have stepped in it so bad.
She knows me. Jennifer knows me so well. She knows I would have.
I mean,
You made
Nichelle is
the right choice.
a wonderful human being. I mean, incredibly talented actor. Absolutely. But just a great person to be around. I did a little work. Vic Cook and I did a little work for Nichelle on a project that she had about a decade before she passed. And and it didn't end up going anywhere. I think largely because the guy who was spearheading it was her manager at the time, and he was, shall we say, not young. And I say that as a not young guy myself. He even made me feel not young, or made me feel young, I should say. So he passed away, and that sort of took the air out of the project, and it never ended up going. But what that meant is that I got to spend quite a bit of time with her at her home out in the San Fernando Valley, and she's just, I mean, smart and witty and lovely, just a truly lovely individual. And then, talent. We had already, used her as Diane Maza in previous episodes, not a lot, but here and there as Elisa's mom. But she comes in for this one, and, they only get the script a day before. That's how tight our deadlines were. So the actors only would get it. And sometimes by saying the day before, what that really means is that it gets emailed to them, or in those days, probably not even email, probably messenger.
FedEx or something.
That night. And if we're being honest, I don't know what the case was with Nichelle specifically. In this instance, I have no memory. I'm not sure I ever knew. But a lot of times, they don't have to memorize those scripts because they got them on the stand in front of them when they record. Sometimes they've read them in advance, and let's be honest, sometimes they're not read in advance. But when Nichelle came in, she was really taken with this script. Credit there to Bryn and Lydia, who wrote, Historia and wrote it, respectively. She just was really enamored of it. They came to the recording, and I think Bryn told us this story, and had and asked her to sign their scripts, but she asked them to sign her script. She liked it so much. And I think she really got into both the role of Diane in this episode and how she interacts with Elisa and how she interacts with Goliath, sort of course correcting Goliath like any good mom would, or mother-in-law, I guess I should say. But also obviously into this role as the storyteller. And that idea of being the storyteller, I think, is important in every culture. I really think that sort of transcends Asian, African, white, certainly Jewish, I imagine Italian. I imagine everyone culturally, the role of the storyteller has always been essential. Modern day, we monetize the damn thing, but once upon a time, this was an important cultural function, and I think she really appreciated that. I hesitate to speak for her, but I recall her telling me this. And so I feel pretty comfortable at saying that. I think she really got a kick out of doing this episode. And she was amazing.
We would be remiss not to talk about one of the legendary stories about her in the history of television. Famously, she was Lieutenant Uhura on Star Trek, and as I recall, for a little while she was...
Oh, really?
And as I recall, for a little while, she was unhappy with that, and she was thinking of quitting, and it was actually Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. who convinced her to stay on the show, because at the time, seeing an African-American woman in a position like that on the show, they would usually play the maid or something. So Martin Luther King convinced her it was important for young black women and young black men also to see that.
Yeah, very true.
Hugely important. And she was fantastic.
Yeah.
I missed that whole I missed the whole Star Trek season, the first one. Well, first time when they were first aired, because I had 4 sisters, and they controlled the TV set. But I caught up when they went into syndication and watched every episode every night, but it was important back then. There were very few Black people in any sort of position. We had Bill Cosby, but shows, and also, the Mod Squad. I mean, I remember them. I think Spencer for Hire was on around that time too, but it was very few. So, but a woman in a strong position was unusual, but it was inspiring to see her on that bridge.
LeVar Burton as Anansi. I mean, another Star Trek actor. We've got two in this episode, and they aren't Jonathan and Marina. And LeVar's another amazing person himself. I mean, Reading Rainbow,
what about storytelling?
Roots.
Right?
There you go.
Yeah.
I mean, LeVar was wonderful. LeVar was, again, for us, part of this, what it became a little mini tradition of our show, which was, we had Jonathan Marina, and they talked up our show among the cast, so that's how we got Brent Spiner and how we got Michael Dorn and how we got LeVar Burton, is they were, they'd be sitting there going, it's a good gig. The scripts are good. There's no makeup. You don't have to arrive 3 hours early to get in makeup. You don't have to wear a visor over your eyes or contact lenses that would blind you. No costumes. You can wear whatever you want. You don't even have to memorize the script. So, from their point of view, it was a fun gig, and the stories were fun and the sessions were fun. Thanks to Jamie Thomason. But
one day he's going to find out you're saying nice things about him.
I know. I count on the fact that Jamie never follows up on anything, so he'll never do this. But he ran a good set, so to speak. A good room, and so it was fun, and we always had a good time, and so. When we were casting Anansi, it's like, well, who should we get? And this idea of a show that's about a storyteller and about a character that's so culturally important in Africa, it seemed like, having nothing to do with Star Trek, that LeVar was just sort of perfect for it. And he was great.
Totally. Jen, what do you think of LeVar in the role of Anansi?
I don't think I realized it was him the first time I watched it.
I didn't.
Just because of all the effects on his voice.
We did put an effect because the spider ended up being so huge, which is good.
And a little bitty voice coming out, a great big spider.
Yeah, so we put an effect on there to give it more heft. But the acting is still.
But once you know it's him, you hear it. You can definitely hear it's him. Like once, it's him. You watch the credits at the end, and you're like, wait a minute. And when you hear it again, you can definitely hear him. You can hear the inflection. And for it's not. He's a trickster, So he has fun with it, I think. And when he gets so full of himself and he's overly proud, all of that is just, you've got a giant spider, but he's still getting the emotions across, and it was really good.
Don Reed as Farmaku and Roxanne Beckford as Taya Gora were both terrific as well.
Yeah.
I know Roxanne will be back as Beth Maza and Cloudfathers, but
Roxanne really knocked us out. She really impressed us, and Don was good too, but I just remember I had not worked with Roxanne before, and really thought she was terrific. Many years later, when my son was playing t-ball, sort of would stand out in the field with his glove over his face. The ball. All right. He's an adult, he's successful, all's well with my son, but t-ball was not his thing. But Roxanne was also had a kid who was a mom in the t-ball league, and so Roxanne and I ran into each other over and over again this one year that Benny played t-ball. But and she's just a lovely human being. I remember in this episode, I'd never worked with Roxanne before, and she really knocked us out. So when we down the road, when we needed to find a new Beth Maza, because the original one, I can't remember why, but wasn't available. Roxanne immediately came to mind for Jamie and I. It was like, hey, she was really great. Let's bring her in again. And she did a terrific job as Beth as well, which we'll get to down the road. But yeah, she really did, I thought, in this episode, bring it all sorts of levels, starting at, massive anger, and then, finding all sorts of nuances for that as the episode progresses.
Awesome. Now, I'll admit, before I saw this episode for the first time, I was not familiar with the Anansi legend at all. Jen, were you?
Yes. And I don't know why, unless it was the monkey thing. I don't know where that all came from. I don't remember.
That would be totally weird if you saw it by film strip somewhere down the line.
I'm kind of wondering.
We'll have to watch it later and find out.
But that's definitely like somewhere tucked away in the mythology stuff in my brain. It was there for sure.
Yeah, I'm a little bit more familiar with it now. I wouldn't call myself an expert, but I did rush to the library after this, and I looked up what I could find. But I was always doing that after a Gárgolas episode, especially during the world tour. But I do have a couple notes here. Kwaku, forgive me if I'm mispronouncing any of this, because I'm probably going to. Kwaku Anansi is a familiar figure in West African legend, with his stories passed down through oral tradition. Perfect. The stories have been passed down for several centuries and likely date back to ancient times beyond memory or record. It is believed the folklore surrounding the trickster originated in what is now modern-day Ghana. In fact, its name is Akan, literally translates to spider. And many of the Akan Ashanti stories from Ghana is something of a buffoon trickster, always coming up with wily schemes to benefit himself at the expense of others, whether by obtaining more food for himself or by some other way. As in Gárgolas, however, his schemes have a way of backfiring upon him with comically humiliating results. And my second note, in the 17th century, spider tales found themselves in North America, particularly across the Caribbean, as a result of the Atlantic slave trade. Well established for fooling its adversaries, the trickster spider quickly came to represent not only survival, but resistance against involuntary servitude, and a connection to the storytellers and listeners of ancestral roots.
Yeah, nice.
I mean, I think that fits what our thinking was. I was familiar with Anansi a little bit because I was interested in the trickster figure long before I started working on Gárgolas even. And so I sort of studied a little bit about tricksters all across the world, about that archetype. But it doesn't surprise me that in Africa, he's more of a schemer. And then when push comes to shove in America, he becomes more heroic because you need him to be more heroic in the so-called land of the free, right? So
we adapt our legends to what
we were doing
need.
A story set in Africa. So the kind of tale we were telling was one of these stories where he's more, I got this brilliant scheme. How's it going to work out for everyone? Oh, maybe not so well for me. Okay. Because again, that's part of being the trickster figure. That archetype is a character that walks the line, and sometimes it falls to one side and sometimes to the other.
I am very amused by the Dream On Spider-Man line, especially now, and that's not because I'm just a major Spidey fan, but Spider-Man Peter Parker is famously a trickster hero himself with a spider motif. I mean, as I recall, in the J. Michael Straczynski run of Amazing Spider-Man comics, he even made a character just draw a link between Spider-Man and Anansi the Trickster, which I thought was really cool when I first read that back in the early 2000s.
Mm-hmm.
Jen, I know you're a major Spidey fan too. What did you think of Lisa's line there?
It's very much wink, wink. No, it was cute.
Funny thing is we put that in there years before I had a shot at doing any Spider-Man. You know? Later, I produce a whole TV series and write comics about him with him, but and with Miles as well as Peter. But back then, it was just, I like Spider-Man. Let's throw this line in. It's funny.
How do you have a spider story and not mention Spider-Man? Question first, going back to the trickster thing. So was there like a specific looking out for tricksters all over the world to bring into stories here? Because we've got a lot of tricksters in Gargoyles. So
there was. I mean, we started with Puck. I mean, in truth, we started with Xanatos, but I don't think I realized that instantaneously. Like, Xanatos ends up being a trickster figure. In looking back, I realized he kind of was from day one, but I don't think we were conscious of that when we started. I could be wrong. Maybe Michael was, or somebody was, but I think that was something that realization built with us. So from our point of view, we sort of started with Puck, and then Raven, and then Anansi, and then Coyote, and that idea of running those through. And by the time we got to Coyote, which again we'll discuss down the road a bit, but by then we definitely knew that Xanatos was a trickster. So we were playing him in Cloud Fathers as a trickster figure, as well as Coyote. But that again is an archetype. You know, there are a couple archetypes that have always sort of fascinated me. One is the trickster, and another is the bastard, and they have overlapping qualities. But one of the things that they have in common, again, is that, you know, sometimes they're the hero and sometimes they're the villain. And with the trickster, sometimes they're the comedian, you know, or the buffoon. And none of those things are out of character. And that becomes interesting to me. So that was something I was always sort of looking to put in to the show. And I think when it's been a couple of weeks, because we were originally going to record this a few weeks ago, but I went back through the old memos that I had written about this episode, and so I'm a little hazy, because even though it hasn't been 30 years, it's been only a couple of weeks since I've read these memos. My memory doesn't hold for 2 weeks very well. But I seem to recall that in these memos, Britt and Lydia were struggling a little bit to find the core of who the opposition was in the fable and in the myth. And I suggested Anansi, because again, I'd done a lot of research on tricksters over the years, maybe a little surface, but I'd sort of been clocking in, oh, here's a trickster and there's a trickster. And it was something that truly interested me. And in fact, after Gárgolas, I developed a TV series called The Trickster, which never ended up happening, but set in New Orleans. And it was a great research trip when we went down to New Orleans to do all the research for it, which I put that trip, combined that with Jamie Thomason's wedding to his now ex-wife. So it was a great trip and a great wedding, actually. But that, again, it was a subject that interested me. So, yeah, we were consciously looking to find trickster figures to add to the mythology. And then at some point, I think late in season 2, someone suggested adding another trickster, at which point I said, we've got 4 plus Xanatos, maybe. Maybe let's hold off for a little bit before introducing the 5th trickster to the show. And so we did. We didn't add a 5th one, and I can't remember now which one it was. It might have been discussion of adding Loki in Eye of the Storm. I may not have that right. It's been so long, but there may have been some discussion of adding Loki to Eye of the Storm, and we just decided, okay, I think we've got enough tricksters going. But there was talk for season 3 before I sort of got removed or removed myself from season 3, what became the Goliath Chronicles, at doing an all trickster episode where we have all 4 tricksters in there, Puck, Coyote, Raven, and Anansi, all trying
chaos.
Yeah, all trying to out-con each other. And they were kidnapping Alexander Xanatos. And that became some weird episode of Goliath Chronicles once we left the show. When Dennis left and I left and Frank left, and people who took over were very well-meaning and probably very talented, but had very little time even to get to know the show they were working on. So that Goliath Chronicles episode of Alexander being kidnapped was going to be this very sophisticated multi-trickster episode, and instead it sort of became,
as I recall, a corrupt politician.
Kidnapped Alex? I can't remember now.
Yeah, it was something like that. I haven't seen it since 1996, but it was a corrupt politician that I remember. And we've got our fill of those these days, but always have, but even more so. But anyway, this is a great episode, and the Elisa's relationship with her mother, their entire dynamic. In a lot of ways, that's my dynamic with mine. So every time I watch this, I'm like, yeah, kind of. Jen, what do you think of it? I'm sure you've been on both ends of that one.
I loved the way we were looking at the way the groups were split up, and Diane schooling Goliath, and just how the reverse of everything, and it's parents and children, and this is how you're always going to think it's too much or not enough, and it's just how things are. And but I really liked how that split. I'm glad they got split up the way they did. I don't know if it was on purpose the way they did, but I loved, I would watch a whole show of just Diane and Goliath hanging out.
I would love to see that. There's that moment. I don't need looking after.
But they're so alike. And that's the thing. Like, I love it. Like, yeah, Goliath knows better. Like, Goliath's like, oh, no, of course not. Like, he knows. He's been hanging out with her daughter. He knows not to mess with her.
There's a nice arc to it also. I mean, Diane is telling this story, and Angela, who's never met Diane before, is really taken with the story and with the storyteller. And she's like, who is that? Is that like their queen, their magus? I forget the exact line, but she's like, and Elisa's like, well, actually, that's my mom. And then you get moments where you can clearly see Elisa and Diana reverting to Elisa's teenage years,
I'm hearing a case. Oh, please.
Yeah. There's
more secrets.
Right. There's just this sense of, and I had lunch with my parents yesterday, and every once in a while I find myself slipping into old habits. It's a fun dynamic to play, but then you really see them, as Jen said, they separate, and Angela, who's looking for a certain something from her father and not getting it, is actually jealous of what Elisa has and feels like Elisa isn't appreciating it. And Elisa's feeling like, no, I'm not explaining this right. I must not be explaining this right, because you should sympathize with me, not with my mom. But it really makes her think, and likewise, Diane is schooling Goliath, and he's realizing, oh yeah, I've been looking at this all wrong.
Yeah.
And
you are the parent here.
Right.
She's the only hatchling here. Be her father.
Right.
Like, your father to all of her Rickery siblings, but you're the one that's here. She's the one that's here.
Yeah.
So, like I love that moment. I absolutely love that. Where she's just like, there's only one hatchling here.
On that note, we need to bring this up because I remember this. I would tear my own hair out at this, but for many years, for a very long time, the ending of this episode with the Goliath and the Angela aspect was so widely misinterpreted by so many people.
Oh, that he was just going to be
the human father, that they would embrace human nuclear families at this point, and to the point where someone was arguing to me, and we'll get to that episode later, that if it had been Gabriel who was injured in Hunter's Moon, Goliath would not have reacted that way. And I'm like, that's still his rookery son too. But people just didn't get it. They assumed that he changed his entire cultural outlook here.
I mean, look, I have 2 kids. Jen has, I don't know, 18, 19?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
I have 2 kids, and I love them both. But if I'm only with one, doesn't mean I stop being a parent to that one because the second one isn't around. I mean, that's just a ridiculous thing. And of course, Goliath's fears about this have way more to do with Damona than Angela. She's focused on this biological relationship, and that's nerve-wracking for Goliath, not because of his relationship with Angela, but because what it might mean if she then looks for her mother, or looks to her mother, her biological mother, to be a mother figure to her. And he thinks that's dangerous. And,
it is.
If your biological mother is genocidal, it might be problematic, and he's letting that fear define his relationship with Angela. He's keeping her at arm's distance because he's only thinking about the fact that Angela's focused on this biological imperative that's a human concept, not a gargoyle concept, because she was raised by humans. But what Diane sort of shines a light on is that she's still your daughter. And Greg, you're absolutely right. If Gabriel had been the one who chose to go with them on this journey instead of Angela, which of course would be totally out of character for Gabriel, but that aside, this weird hypothetical, if it had been Gabriel, I think Goliath wouldn't have had any trouble treating Gabriel as a son, because there's no distraction from the biological side of this. And if Gabriel had been badly injured in Hunter's Moon, I think Goliath's response to that would have been just as strong. Same with Ophelia, same with any of the Avalon clan members. Because Goliath is, in fact, not regarding Angela as his biological daughter suddenly. He's regarding her suddenly, finally, as his daughter. That's the gargoyle relationship. Hudson has many children. Up to this point, Goliath has had none. But that changes once Diane, gives him some clarity.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Angela is giving Elisa some clarity. And so the arc of their stories is that Diane and inadvertently Elisa help fix things for Goliath and Angela. But likewise, this adventure fixes things for Diane and Elisa in a way that, and they begin to relate to each other in a way we haven't seen. We've seen Elisa be very close to her dad.
And we'll see that again soon.
Yeah, and we've seen it before this. And we've seen that Derek is closer to Diane. But this is the moment where, obviously they all love each other. I don't think there should be any question to that. It's not like Elisa loves her dad and doesn't love her mom. That's not even a question. But in terms of how she relates to them, she had trouble relating to her mom. And this is a sea change, I think. And I think, Dennis and his team did a fantastic job at playing those moments, both the moments with Lisa and Angela, the moments with Goliath and Diane, but then at the end, that moment with Diane and Elisa, I think is kind of beautiful.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Mm-hmm. Very. I think part of the reason why, and Jen, I want to hear your thoughts, and it's why some of fans misinterpreted Goliath's perspective at the end of this, is because Gargoyle's parentage is truly unique, even among fictional species. Most science fiction aliens on Star Trek are elves and dwarves on Lord of the Rings. They very much do that blood of my blood, parent, child, nuclear family thing. Jen, am I wrong?
No, I don't think you're wrong. I think the problem with the way people saw it like that is because they are like that. Like that's I would think it was more of a humans see that as normal, and so they were trying to normalize, quote unquote, Goliath and Angela's relationship.
Sounds about right, which is one of the reasons why I appreciate the comics now, Dark Ages, and with Nashville and Eduardo, but they're showing us the Gargoyle way in full practice as opposed to Goliath kind of not being a father of any kind here. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm trying to do. There's a lot of, I don't know how to put this, impetus, I guess, from the fans sometimes, not all the fans, but some fans who
who you are.
Yeah. Not viewing them as humans with wings, and we worked very hard. Dennis, Frank, Bob Klein, myself, Michael Reeves, Bryn, Gary, Carrie, Lydia, and everyone who worked on the show, Greg Guler, certainly. This wasn't about a bunch of humans who had wings. This was a whole other species with a whole other biological set of rules and a whole other culture of their own. And the idea of it takes a village to raise a child, which, became a cliche, when Hillary Clinton published that book, and it became a cliche, and it became a left-wing kind of thing that right-wing people were fond of attacking, I guess, because, got to attack something. I don't know. I'm not even sure why, but that really was, it takes a clan, we really absorbed that into our thinking about how gargoyles raised their children. The idea of no names, the idea of the eggs are all placed together and no one knows whose egg is who. No one cares whose egg is who. And this sort of idea that the whole clan is responsible for raising these hatchlings into rooklings and raising the rooklings into warriors, it is an important idea that separates gargoyles from just being humans with wings. And that was completely essential to the whole property. To the whole concept of it. The idea originates with something even simpler than that, which is that gargoyles sleep during the day. So at night, that's their whole world. So they don't view nighttime as dark the way we do. Night is full of colors.
Mm-hmm.
They're rich magentas and purples and dark blues and various shades of brown and black and that kind of thing. But it's not a dark Batman-esque. And I love Batman. I'm not being critical of Batman, but it's not a sort of dark Gotham-esque, grim, the world is black and shadows.
Noir.
That's their whole world. So it's, from their point of view, it's full of color. It's a rich experience to be nocturnal and a night dweller when you're a gargoyle, because it's their entire experience. And so from moment one, we thought in terms of, we've got to view this as a distinct species and not just as, okay, these are humans that turn to stone during the day, wake up, they have wings, that it can't, they got to think different. Not that there is an overlap. Of course there's overlap. But it was important to us from day one to get that idea solidly across. And, we've talked about it in previous episodes where every once in a while I was so excited to get those ideas across that I would wedge in some kind of expository line, like in Grief, when I'm saying gargoyles only age, at half speed, because I was so excited to get that information to the fans. Oh my gosh, that sometimes I put it in where it didn't really fit. Not that it wasn't true, but just that, why would he say that then? But that was the idea, was constantly, reminding ourselves, because we're all humans working on the show, that they're not human. And that we want to celebrate that difference, expand upon that difference, and not negate it or try to, again, one of the messages of the show was that tolerance was insufficient, and that we're looking for empathy. But empathy doesn't mean that you become the other or that the other has to become you. It means you try to understand. You try to walk a mile in the other's shoes, whether you're a gargoyle trying to walk a mile in Elisa's shoes or whether you're Elisa trying to walk a mile in Goliath's shoes. It's still that idea of empathy and not just, oh, well, you've got to assimilate or you don't count.
Yeah.
Yeah, we see a lot of that in the real world. It feels like if we're lucky at that point, we see a lot of that, but it's gotten even worse than that. But let's shift gears. Jen, what do you think of the Werepanthers, these two new characters, Taya and Faramaku?
Okay, well, first of all, we have to understand that Jennifer has a were issue.
Oh, I understand that perfectly. That's why I asked you.
I've never been a vampire girl. I have always been a werewolf girl. Okay. So I love this introduction to them in this world. And so I like these were characters that I would like to have seen down the line for sure. This is just like an origin story as far as like the way I was looking at it. Now they've got to go off and do their adventures.
Yeah, I think the relationship is messed up.
Oh, and they've got issues. Oh, yeah. Like, oh my gosh, like he's just gonna take that, you're gonna be a panther with me, and then she's just like, no, well, I'm gonna kill every panther in the world then. Like,
and she was willing to kill innocent people who were witnesses too, let's be honest. So he violated her, and they are not great people, let's be honest.
No, but was a lesson for them.
Progress.
I mean, Tony Stark was an asshole too. I mean, he still is, arguably, but
a lot of Marvel heroes start out that way as assholes.
But so, like, they've got a lot of growth to do. So we're not starting off right at the top, but
it leaves them someplace to go to.
Right. They've got to build from there.
Right.
And I would like to get back to them someday. I do think they're really interesting characters, and again, part of the idea, part of our literally marching orders we had from Michael Eisner in those days.
The shared universe.
Hey, we're trying to create a Disney action universe with gargoyles, in essence, as the Fantastic Four of that universe. Just as at Marvel, it all began with the Fantastic Four, and then you kept adding characters, and then you kept mixing and matching them and that kind of thing. So we were consciously on the world toward thinking in terms of leaving new heroes, whether it's the Golem,
Cuchulainn, left them all across the world.
Not Solani, all these characters, we were trying very consciously to sort of leave potential heroes and not necessarily finished products, not necessarily like everyone, okay, now they're there. Suddenly they're Superman. No, the idea was they're works in progress. And we were very conscious during the world tour of trying to sort of spice, I'm not sure that's the right word, but kind of, sprinkle the world with heroes all across the globe. And we were trying very hard to be international. There's a tendency, certainly in the 90s, less so today, at least a little less. But certainly in the 90s and before that, the tendency was always to be very Euro-focused, American-focused, but the Euro side of America, and we were working hard to throw that off. We did European-centric episodes, but we did South American episode, and we did a Japanese episode, and we did an African episode, and we were trying to sort of create more balance than I think Dennis and I and Frank and everyone had been seeing in other shows, in that day and age.
Yep.
And so, having Taya and Farah as We're Panthers, as people who had a distance yet to go, but at least were beginning to get their heads on straight and getting on track. That was really interesting to me. And it was something that, again, if things had worked out differently, if Jeffrey and Gary and Bruce hadn't left the company, if Michael hadn't felt pressure to stop doing the deciding on the animated shows himself, if we had gotten more support and that idea of the Disney action universe coming out of Gárgolas had held for even one more year, I think you would have seen a lot more of Taya and Farah and many of the characters that we introduced going out, because that was the plan. It just, then the plan kind of evaporated out from under us at some point.
Some we've since seen in the comics. But Dennis, do you have any memories of directing this episode? I mean, the fact that the presentation of this episode seems to mean a lot to you.
Again, mostly the opening, and then going into the relationship of the two lovers, which got more sort of complicated as you got toward the climax. And but again, Elisa and her mother was like the second star of that show. I mean, she really, Michelle really just pulled that character so much into our, you every time she talked to Goliath to correct him, as a dad, I would say, yeah, she's got a point there, buddy. You got to listen to her. It was a lot of good stuff in that episode from the beginning, and then the relationships, and we saw those relationships gel between Goliath and Elisa's mom, and then Elisa and her mother, and then Angela. I mean, it was just it's a great family show. That was the best Gargoyle family show.
Went a weird way to get some good points across, family points across.
Yeah.
The fight in a giant spider. I love that they both share. I don't know if I'd call it arachnophobia, but they definitely don't like spiders. I love that moment. This is the moment that connects them.
There's some great lines in this episode that I just love. As he's losing this battle, Anansi's sort of desperate, and he goes, "I will spin you wishes." And LeVar's reading of that line is so great. And
making promises.
Yeah, it's terrific. And then there's these great series of lines at the end, which I jotted down, maybe not completely accurately, but Diane is sort of feeling that she's been on Elisa's case, and she's like, if love is about growing closer, it's also about letting go. And then Elisa, and it is really easy, because it's true that Nichelle did this amazing job, but I don't want to undercut Sally's role in playing Elisa as the daughter. Again, there's this immature stuff toward the beginning where it's like, Mom, get off my
Don't embarrass
back.
me in front of my mythical friends.
Yeah. But at the end, when Diane says that, it's about letting go. Elisa's like, but don't let go just yet.
Yeah.
Because the truth is, I love you and I need you and you're my mom and I haven't been appreciating you. And all of that is all layered into Sally's reading of that line.
Right.
And so it's a well-written line, which I imagine is Lydia's or Bryn's. I'm not sure. Might even be mine, I suppose. It's way too long ago for me to remember. But the point is the way Sally read it. It's just a beautiful moment. And the what you're seeing on screen complements that, and it's just lovely out on the whole thing.
There's a moment, and Bridget gets to play Angela a little sarcastic, which doesn't happen very often, where she's like, "You're right, parents and children should be able to talk about anything."
A little passive aggressive moment.
Yeah.
Angela.
She doesn't do that often.
She's done with this. She's done at this point.
But again, the whole episode is about atonement. Farah has things to atone for. Taya has things to atone for. Even Goliath has things to atone for. And it's about reconciliation. And you get that out of all three sets of relationships. And there was some talk early on, and instead of Farah and Taya being, in essence, lovers, that let's make Farah the dad. And he doesn't want his daughter going away. And I thought, we've got the Panther Queen and her children. We've got Goliath and his daughter. We've got Elisa and her mother. I thought, we're doing the parent-kid thing enough.
Yeah.
I know it would feel resonant to have Farah be the dad, but I think we might be overplaying the hand a little. So we made them lovers instead of, obviously we didn't use the word lover in a 90s cartoon on Disney, but
the point came very much across.
Right. We made them a couple as opposed to yet another parental relationship in trouble. And I think that was better. I think it would have been gilding it a little much if that was also
that sort of that dynamic is sort of like setting up the seed that that's the beginning of a relationship or continuation of a relationship that may grow into husband and wife, but it wasn't a certainty,
right?
And I think that's something that was it had potentials, like you say. You wanted to bring them back at some point. It's a potential that you can have that story that's still left to be told instead of it being history.
I will admit, there's an interesting moment for me with Taya when she shouts to Anansi, "Then it's you I will destroy." And there's a part of me that thinks, no, I still think this is more Farah's fault than Anansi's. Anansi was just spinning a wish and making a bargain, but I suppose there's always that, despite everything, this is still someone I care about, even though I'm really pissed off at him. So I'm gonna direct my rage at this person instead.
Yeah. And, Anansi being a trickster may have also sort of led Farah Maku down this path.
Right.
I'm not trying to absolve Farah of all that he did, but let's face it, if it's Anansi and Farah, who's got the upper hand there? And so there may be some justification towards directing your anger toward the guy who manipulated my ex-boyfriend into doing something really shitty.
Fair enough.
But I don't think you're wrong, Greg. I do think that feelings towards Farah are extremely complicated. And they don't get any less complicated by the end of the issue. They just get a little bit more understanding as each is apologized, for their recent sins. And that's just a step. Again, not a finished product. It's a step.
Jen, do you have any other thoughts on this episode?
I'm good right now. As soon as we are done, I'll think of 3 more things to say.
Oh, that happens every time. It happens to me every single time. I'm like, oh, I should have made that notation. But no, I mean, I'll say this, the art direction is great. I love the design of Cara DG, the way that's a very creepy city, even without the spiders. And I'm not an arachnophobe. I'm still not very fond of spiders. I was once an arachnophobe. I got over that because one day I went to a pet shop and asked to handle a tarantula, but but I was still amused by their reactions. And there's a part of me that thinks, because I'm a geek and I have to go there, are either Elisa or Diane covering their eyes when they go to the theater to watch Return of the King, and there's the big scene with Sheila. Okay, a little anecdote. When I saw that movie for the 3rd time in theaters, I saw that 4 times in 1 week. I'm not kidding. And the 3rd time I saw it, there was the Shelob scene where she's hovering over the stairwell while Frodo is not aware that she's above him. There's this girl in the audience a few rows back going, "Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God." So there's something really primal here when it comes to spiders. And I tend to think in a lot of ways that has to lead into the character of Anansi himself.
Yeah, I mean, spiders do a lot of good in terms of killing pests and that kind of thing. But yeah, I think, our fear of them is fairly primal. I love Karadigi too. We describe it in the script as looking like a web. That's easy for us to say, and that's a sentence to write in a script.
Mm-hmm.
Then Dennis and his team made that real, in other words. And the idea of a city, it was an idea I had before working on this episode, but it's an idea that's stuck with me since. This idea of a city as a spider web is something that I've kept in my head, both while writing the Gárgolas comics and also with writing Spider-Man for Marvel, is this idea that the city is all these connected strings,
right?
And that's become an important metaphor for me that we discovered while making this episode. But again, I really props to Dennis and your team, because it's an easy thing to write in a script. It's a hard thing to make, to actualize, visually. And I really think that was successfully done, both in the fable, but also in the quote unquote reality of the series, which is still also 100% drawn. It's not like we had photo reference of a city that looked like a web,
One thing we had for Gargoyles was a very talented creative crew. I mean,
for real.
Guler, starting with Guler, but just did Don Cameron, people who were doing our backgrounds, paintings. I was never prouder to be part of a team than those guys. Women and women. And it shows. The quality shows on the screen. And we can always be proud of that.
A passion project for all of you.
It was a pain in the ass for all of us.
Blood, sweat, and tears.
Yeah, it's only the passion part came like later on, after the bruises sort of healed. Go ahead. Sorry.
For real though.
Like I said, it's a great one. It's one I've come to appreciate more over the years, especially as I've matured and gotten older. But I don't recall it being one of my top favorites originally, but it's really gone up in my eyes over the years. The older I get and the more life experience I have, it's a very good one.
Fun fact: this episode made me pick up my first Black Panther comic at the comic store.
Oh.
I don't even it was just like, oh, hey, Panthers. And I picked it up, and that was the first Black Panther comic I ever bought.
Okay, now it just hits me. Diane tells a story about a panther queen, and her son is now a panther. I wonder if that led to her motivations here.
That's a 30-year-old revelation there.
A little slow. Catch up. We're good.
And yeah, it is. I'm not always on the ball. I think some of you all noticed that. Nice. All right. Are there any other final thoughts on this episode from anyone?
No, I'm good.
Good.
All right. So this is gonna go up on April 24th or 25th. Is there anything you want to promote, Dennis?
No, not really, not right now. Except for my invite everyone to see my YouTube channel. That's about it. That's where I keep most of my days, just dumping stuff there. It's I call it my journeyman artist project, and basically it's everything I did from when I was 12 years old to now.
That's a lot.
Yeah, I mean, it's and Greg would. I mean, when listening to Greg talks about he could be the same thing. When all of our colleagues, we get well known or known for one or two shows in our lifetime, but really, if we pulled out our projects and projects that we worked on that didn't go anywhere, it's a journey. You know, you worked on something like I said with Black Mark of the Panther. I worked on children's film strips, and that gave me an exposure to Anansi the spider that shows up 20 years later, you know, that type of thing. And we all have that in our careers.
Oh, yeah.
You get fixated on the pinnacles, you know, the highlights, but really it's all that other little stuff that helps build and prepare you for hitting the mark on something like Gargoyles.
Excellent. And while you're here, and I'm sure Jennifer will second this, we also want to tell people this man worked on a show in the 90s before Gargoyles called Exo Squad. You may not have heard of it.
God,
it was it was quite obscure. Go check it out. Go get a hold of it. It was good.
Thank you.
Oh, I love the show so much.
That's where we stole Dennis away from Exo Squad.
Yeah, they did. My Will Mineo, who's the producer of Exo Squad. In fact, I was first season of Exo Squad. I was the overseas supervisor for 6 months in Korea. And then the second year, they said, "Hey, you want to go back?" And I said, "No, I don't think so." I said, "Well, come to California." I was living in New York. They said, "Come to California and you can work on the second season as co-producer," which I did. And but when they were looking to hire for Gargoyles, Will Mineo recommended me. And he recommended me, I think, to Frank Parr, and then with the recommendation that I wouldn't embarrass him in a meeting.
Well, that wasn't an issue for Dennis on Gargoyles because Frank and I were spending so much time embarrassing ourselves. Dennis was always, let's be honest, the grown-up in the room. Frank and I would, you know, bounce. And by the way, Frank and I get along great now. We're doing the Demona comic. It's all good. But back then, you know, there was a lot of clashing, always to make the show better. I mean, it was never ego. It was always like, how do we make the show better?
Yeah.
But we were loud. We were two loud guys.
You're loud?
Yeah. Shut up. We were two loud guys, and Dennis, and to a lesser extent, Bob, were like the grown-ups, you know, while who.
Did they get paid for babysitting you guys?
No. I mean, they got paid, but
not to babysit that mess.
Not the combat pay they deserve. But yeah,
like,
you know,
how do we get out of this meeting without blood being spilled?
Right, exactly. So there was definitely an element of with Dennis and Bob separately because they worked on separate sets of episodes. I don't ever feel like it was the two of them versus the two of us, but they were the calming influences to us, and I don't think they get enough credit for that either. You know, because that second season was brutal. I mean, I loved it. Don't get me wrong, but in terms of having to produce 52 episodes on that schedule,
Yeah.
it was brutal. And I was barely more than a kid. And Frank is only a little bit older than me. And both of us were just, we were yellers. And that wasn't a great way to do things. But back then we didn't know any better. I think I know better now, I think. But
I'm not going to comment on that.
But it was,
I almost wanted to ask.
Yeah, it was stressful.
Oh, yeah.
That schedule.
There was a couple of times, a couple of artists I had, mine had a disagreement over a shot, and they'd come back to me like 2 or 3 or 4 times, and they go to Greg and ask for, hey, Greg, you got to tell Dennis, you got to do this. And Greg would call me and say, hey, this guy is saying he wants to do this. I said, well, send him to my office. And I have an artist come to my office and say, look, close that door. Over here, I have 5 storyboards I'm going through, and you're fucking with me over one scene. Get out of here. That's where it comes down.
That's where we're at right now.
Yeah, it's like I got 5 storyboards I'm trying to get through, and you want to screw around with me for one scene. Let me have that scene as the director, okay? If it screws up, I'm the one that's going to get dumped on, not you. So just get out of my office.
Awesome.
Those kind of conversations you had to have, and then you just get on with it. We didn't have time.
Yeah, it was, like the Dragon's Maw. You're constantly just racing to keep ahead of those chompers. And it's hard. And I will say that the 4 of us, Frank, myself, and Dennis and Bob, who were the 4 producers on the show, we had a lot of skills, a lot of talent, and a lot of skills among that group of 4. But I think from the standpoint of maturity, and I don't mean age, I mean, maturity that transcends age. I think
age too. I'm about 10 years
had a little
older
more of that than Frank and I did in those days. But the end product is what matters. No one would give a damn if Gárgolas was mediocre. No one would care who was angry and who was sweet and any of that. None of that matters. And like I said, any conflict that any of the team had was, I think, and I really believe this, it's not lip service. I really don't think it was never about ego. It was never about who can win, there were no politics to it. It was all about how do we make the show better? The best example, and I may have told this story before, that I remember is we were talking about Avalon.
Was it Avalon Part 2, The Beach?
Avalon.
We had both Dennis and Frank on for Avalon Part 2 show to talk about that. So you can go back and listen to that if you want to.
Okay, yeah. So go listen to that story. Frank doesn't want me to tell it again. So
but I'll give you another example. Is like this is still, and Gargoyles was still the age of hand-painted animation on cells.
Right.
And I got pulled on the carpet because we had one studio that was giving us bad camera work. I mean, they weren't cleaning the cells, and you can see the dirt move across, the film. And they were saying, hey, Dennis, you're making too many retakes. You're calling too many retakes. So I had Tom Rizika come in. He's a producer, and Lisa Salamoni, the vice producer, come in and sit with me during a retake session. And they started to see how dirty the thing was. And they said, okay. I said, well, look, you see how dirty it is. Is that going to be Disney quality you want on the screen, on the TV screen?
Those were magic words.
And I said, you hired me for Disney quality. So I want to give you Disney quality. Is that what you want to go on the screen? And they said, no, keep calling those retakes. Because
Yeah.
It's only 1 or 2 episodes, but that was one of the things we were still fighting. I mean, it was just, you would just get distracted by this stuff. You had to change it, but it blew your schedule, it blew your budget. Those are things we had to fight for.
And I'm so glad he did. All right. Again, this is coming out on April 24th or 25th. Greg, do you have anything you want to promote?
By now, I would guess Spectacular Spider-Man 14 would be out. Maybe not quite 15, I wouldn't think. But so if you should try and make sure you've got all first 14 issues of Spectacular Spider-Man. I'm really proud of it. Issue 11 in particular, if you haven't seen that one, is something that every Gárgolas fan, I think, would really get a kick out of.
Yes.
And then, look forward in a week or so for Free Comic Book Day when Demona number 0, written by me and drawn by Frank Parr, comes out. And there's one other thing I want to give a little plug to. I didn't work on it, but I just watched last night this documentary about a Goofy movie called Not Just a Goof. And I've always been a huge fan of a Goofy movie. I worked on it a tiny bit way at the beginning. I'm not mentioned in this documentary. I forgive them. I worked on it a tiny bit toward the beginning, but didn't really have much to do with it after that. But I remember I remember very clearly when I first saw it, just being blown away by how real the emotions of a Goofy movie were. And this documentary really captures that. Beth and I watched it last night, and tonight we're going to rewatch a Goofy movie, which I haven't seen probably 20 or 30 years.
I recently, probably it was pandemic. I rewatched it, and it's still so good.
It's really good.
Such a good movie.
It's so unappreciated in its time by reviewers and money people and all this sort of thing. It was sort of written off as nothing, and it shouldn't have been, because it was really
get your box of Kleenex and watch it.
From something like Lion King or Beauty and the Beast, but it was a spectacular achievement in using animation and even a character as comedic as Goofy to do something that truly felt real in a way that I don't think you find even in a movie like Lion King. And I love Lion King, don't get me wrong, but I always thought that a Goofy movie was underrated, and it really made me feel great to see this documentary and see how appreciated the movie's become in hindsight. So it's on Disney Plus. I recommend Not Just a Goof, the documentary, and definitely recommend rewatching a Goofy movie, also on Disney Plus.
Yeah.
I'll do both.
And again, I got no skin in that game, and also you get to see a photograph of Jamie Thomason. There's one photo of Jamie. But I love.
We were going to watch it, and then you ruined it.
It gets better. He's thanked at the end, but instead of calling him Jamie Thomason, it just says Jamie Thomas.
You got Mike Wazowski.
So, again, no skin in that game, but I definitely want to plug those two things because Jason Marsden, Bill Farmer, they're both just amazing in that film, and it's great. So watch that.
Yeah.
All right, we definitely will. So on that note, Dennis, thank you for coming back on. Greg, thank you for everything you do. Yeah. Oh, we'll definitely have you on again.
We will definitely have you back.
Got a couple ideas for when to bring you back on. Yep. We'll touch base with you. And Greg, thank you for everything you do. We're going to talk a little bit about your vacation next time. And Jennifer, thank you for everything you do. I know I keep saying can't do this without you.
Phaeton was right.
Now, these days, I really feel that way. Phaeton was right. I think Greg Weisman's the only one who might not quite get that. All right. So, and to our fans, our listeners, thank you once again, and join us next time as we head back to London and New York for Pendragon. And Greg will tell us about his vacation.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for listening to Voices from the Eyrie, a Gargoyles podcast, powered by the Spidey Dude Radio Network, located at spidey-dude.com. If you like this show, then please listen to Spectacular Radio, based on the Spectacular Spider-Man animated series, which features some familiar voices. You can also find these great podcasts: Clone Saga Chronicles, Make Mine Mayday, Amazing Spider-Man Classics, the Sal Buscema Podcast, and Books of X. All of this and more on the Spidey Dude Radio Network. And please follow us on Twitter at From Eyrie. That's From EYRIE. And join us on Patreon at patreon.com/SpideyDude Network for more exclusive content. Thank you.
I don't need looking after.
Of course not.